There was not a single window in the room, but the air seemed somehow viscous, as if each molecule was saturated with anxiety and restrained fear. In the corner, almost under the ceiling, a small fan hung, which was silently steeply, but did not cool this space. It crushed like a wet sheet on the skin and thoughts. Alexei sat on a wooden chair, which had long lost his brilliance, hunched over, compressed in himself as if ready to disappear at any moment, dissolve. His hands trembled, although he tried to hold them motionless. Scraps of words flashed frantically in my head. Prohibitions, promises, accusations. Behind the wall there were muffled voices. It was a meeting of the community, another ritual where the same mantras about fidelity, purification, love were repeated. But this love was compressed into a fist and strangled, turned into a chain. "You betrayed your family," whispered a voice in his head, sobering and cruel. Alexei could not understand where he came from the past, from the present, from the depths of his own soul. Or it was a shadow, obsessive and relentless, like a ghost. His breath was straying, his heart pounded like a drum on a dusty square on which he once played in childhood, when there was no fear yet. He remembered his mother, warm but alarming her face. Those days when the house was full of children's laughter and the smell of fresh bread, when she baked buns and whispered, "The family is all that we have. Never forget." And now? Now this phrase has become not a talisman, but a cage. The family he knew was not just her relatives. She was an instrument of power and manipulation. Like a spider, the cult entered their threads, pulled on his hearts and minds. Alexei felt how a gap grows inside him, tearing confidence and love, fear and hope to pieces. He was afraid to say at least a word that could destroy the shaky structure that his mother, father, sister held, all his loved ones. But the silence in the room has become unbearable. Alexei raised his head. His eyes burned tears, not because of pain, but because of the impossibility of pronouncing what he felt. Suddenly, something inside broke, and a stifled scream remained somewhere on the edge of the throat, entangled between despair and the desire to run. "What is happening to me?" he whispered, almost not hoping for the answer. It was not just fear, it was a knot of betrayal and love, hope and powerlessness. And he did not know if he could ever unleash him. Alexei sat for a long time, unable to move. His whole essence seemed to be divided into two worlds, inside and outside, but both were equally alien and dangerous. The inner voice, which now did not let go for a minute, told him that the family is a fortress, but the shackles are hiding behind its walls. The outside world is cold and cruel, full of those who do not understand, do not accept and judge. A week ago he was part of this system. Rituals, words repeating like a memorized text that no one dared to change. They called this truth that saves. But now for Alexei, this truth has turned into a chain that squeezed the throat. Every evening after dinner, when the family gathered around the table, the atmosphere changed. Behind smiles and warm words were hidden by views filled with expectation and an unspoken requirement. "Be like us, do not think otherwise." These words sounded silently, but their weight fettered their breath. Alexei remembered the last conversation with his father. He, usually calm and strict, now spoke with such an intensity as if he was afraid to lose control. "You think too much, son. You need to listen to the heart, not the mind. The heart knows how to be part of the family." But Alexei's heart shouted, opposed, broke. He tried to find meaning, to understand how love and devotion can become a trap. On one of these evenings, he accidentally heard his mother in a whisper with her sister, on which the cult was founded, about how important it is to keep the family together at all costs, even if you have to sacrifice yourself for this. "We are one soul, Alexei. You will tear this connection. You will lose everything." And here for the first time he realized that for them a family is not only relatives, this is primarily an ideology. Ideology where the action is part of the plan, where love becomes an obligation and freedom is a crime. A fire broke out in the soul of Alexei. He wanted to escape, leave, breathe in full breaths, but around was a labyrinth of faces, words, views that did not let go, did not let himself be. He began to quietly record his thoughts, trying to preserve at least the tiny space of freedom within himself. But every time he hid the diary, he felt something squeezed inside, as if a lie cultivated in the family penetrated even into the deepest corners of his consciousness. His relationship with his relatives began to resemble a theater where everyone played roles. His father is a strong leader, his mother is a guardian of traditions, a sister, an ideal, obedient daughter. And he is a doubting rebel who threatens to destroy everything. A feeling of loneliness, rejection grew in the soul. He saw how relatives are more and more in the day, becoming a part of a large car that devours all real and living. And one evening, when the heart was lying hopelessness, Alexei realized that if he does not resist, he would forever lose himself and those whom he loved. His thoughts were like a whirlwind, breaking against the walls of doubt and fear. But this inner storm was the first spark that could light the fire of change, or burn everything to the ground. The night was especially heavy. Alexei was lying on his bed. His eyes were wide open, but there was no sleep or peace. In the darkness of the room, where every movement seemed louder than a shot, he tried to calm the frantic stream of thoughts. But his mind worked at a double speed. The moments were remembered, which used to seem ordinary, but now they looked like the links of a chain which was dragging more tightly. He remembered how in childhood his father always said, "Family is sacred. It is above all, not a step away." Then it seemed correct and natural, because the family is a house, support. But over the years these words became not just the rules, but with bricks in the wall that separated it from the world and even from itself. Most of all tormented that the mother, who seemed to him with a source of warmth and support, was one of the most stringent guards of this cult. She looked at him with her eyes full of love and a cruel demand for submission. In their gaze he saw unconditional acceptance only when he corresponded, and cold alienation when he doubted. "Why don't you understand?" she said. "Can't you see that we are doing this for your good? You should become the same as us, otherwise, betrayal." This betrayal burned inside. The heart was corroded, giving rise to a burning mixture of shame and anger. Alexei felt that the more he resisted, the more he was immersed in the abyss of alienation. But once, when the next ritual was held in their house, something inside him broke completely. All words, calls, mantras, they sounded like one big false echo, the drowning voice of his soul. He left the room where relatives gathered and to the street, to where the air could breathe, free from claims and obligations. A cold wind hit his face as if exposing everything that was hidden. Alexei looked at the stars which seemed so far, but at the same time, the only ones who could understand him. At that moment, he realized that the family he knew was a prison for him. But the flight was almost impossible. After all, every step of it found a response in the hearts of those whom he loved. Their faith was like a chain that encircled everything around, and to break it meant to destroy not only connections, but also the very essence. He remembered his diary, hiding from everyone, afraid to be exposed. In these lines he spoke with himself, tried to understand who he really is, without imposed roles and masks. These pages have become the last refuge for him. "I have to find a way out," he whispered to himself, "for us all." But the decision was difficult. Every day the pressure grew. The family became an increasingly obsessed idea of unity at all costs, and it was increasingly isolated and desperate. A plan was born in the soul, not an escape, but a struggle from the inside. He understood that it was impossible to break the cult with one word or action, but if you can arouse at least one soul, everything can change. Alexei began to observe, listen to the quiet voices of doubts in the family, look for those inconspicuous cracks that could lead to liberation. It was a game on thin ice where the mistake was too expensive, but there was no choice left. Alexei knew that in every node of this woven web of family ties there is a weak place, the same unspoken pain, fear or secret that the cult had to be hidden at all costs. He began to notice as his mother, with her adamant appearance in rare moments of fatigue, looked down and squeezed her lips as if trying to restrain his internal protest. Father, always calm and confident, sometimes went into himself, looked at the wall, as if looking for salvation in the void. A sister, who seemed exemplary, increasingly became closed and nervous. The sister, as if feeling his desire, also began to open, talking about nights when she cried in a pillow, afraid to show weakness. Gradually, the three of them began a quiet internal struggle with the fact that kept them in captivity. They were not going to destroy the family. They wanted to return it to the real, alive, where love was not punishment, but freedom. But the cult did not like such changes. Gradually, the pressure intensified. Suspicions grew. Family meetings became an arena for testing fidelity and loyalty. Alexei and his sister felt how relatives turn into opponents and the house in the battlefield. In this tension, each of their steps could become fatal. They learned to read signs, hide emotions, protect each other from sharp views and words. With every minute, the struggle became more and more exhausting, but also more necessary. In the soul of Alexei, determination originated. For the sake of himself, for the sake of those who could still remain free, he would not allow the cult knot to break them forever. But the path was long and dangerous, and no one knew how it would end. Several weeks passed in which Alexei and his sister seemed to live a double life. They were part of the family in the afternoon, obeyed rituals and conversations, and at night souls burned from inner protest. With each new day, the pressure became unbearable. Father increasingly began to say that faith is not just a word, but the only path that you can go without fear of abyss. The mother, although less sharp, still followed every step, as if guarding the order, which was most expensive. The inner world of Alexei was filled with contradictions. He longed for love and freedom, but he felt that these two concepts here were enemies. He understood that the love that he was presented was associated with constant control and fear of punishment. And freedom is a flight, betrayal. In this trap, everyone chose his own, and Alexei was afraid that he could not save either one or the other. One evening, when the house plunged into dead silence, Alex woke up from a knock on the door. It was a sister. Her eyes were full of tears and horror. She whispered, "They recognized." Alexei's heart pounded stronger. He understood that their secret is no longer safe. Their attempts to preserve at least a tiny spark freedom is doomed to failure, and now they will face the most cruel battle. They hid the diary that became a symbol of resistance for them, and gathered in the corner of the room, trying to figure out what to do next. But deep down, each of them understood there would be no return to former. The first signs of pressure were manifested instantly. The words of the accusation, threats, hints of exile, of the cult demanded complete submission. Alexei and sister felt that their world was crumbling, but at the same time, power was growing inside them, born not by humility, but by the awareness of the truth. In those days, Alexei often returned thoughts to childhood when everything seemed easier, but now every such memory was like a wound, open and painful. He understood that the family he loved became an arena of the struggle between the light and the shadow, where the cult used the most holy feelings to maintain power. And it was at that moment that Alexei realized that the choice is not between the family and himself, but between fear and hope, between darkness and light, who always live inside each of us. He was ready to go to the end, to break the chains and return those whom he loved to real life. Alexei and his sister spent the night, pondering the possible paths. It was clear to them that it was openly opposed to the father, and mother meant immediate exile, and possibly more terrible consequences. But to be silent means to lose yourself completely. For the first time, Alexei felt the fragile line between struggle and humility, between love and fear. The next day, heavy silence reigned in the house. Father, as if feeling tension, became even stricter. His words sounded like sentences. Family is a sacred circle. Who comes out of it becomes an enemy. Do not forget this. Mother looked at the children with eyes full of bitterness and regret, as if trying to understand where they were lost. Alexei saw how in their views, not only faith is reflected, but also fear of losing control of what seems the only support. At heart, he understood that it was this fear that they feed on their stiffness, and what to destroy the cult is to give people a chance to remember who they really are. He began to secretly collect stories, memories, told his sister about what he saw and felt. Together they tried to understand how to help other family members who had not yet broken under pressure. Once, during one of the family meetings, Alexei decided to say a word that could become the beginning of the end. Why are we afraid to be ourselves? Why does love require such a price? Silence sank to the room, as if gathering in front of a thunderstorm. Father looked at his son with a heavy expression. His mother squeezed her lips, and her sister supported her brother with a weak but firm smile. This was the beginning of a new struggle, the struggle for freedom of the soul, for the right to be a person and not a toy in the hands of a cult. Alexei knew that the path would be long and painful, but for the first time in a long time he felt the power to go forward no matter what. The days turned into weeks, and the tension in the house reached the limit. Alexei saw how the family was slow, but it changes correctly. Some relatives, the closest, began to ask questions that previously seemed unthinkable. They did not immediately express their doubts out loud, but sparks of dissatisfaction and the desire to understand what was happening lit up in their eyes. In parallel with this, a sense of danger grew. The cult could not allow such a split. His mechanisms were included with renewed vigor. Control intensified. Suspicions turned into accusations, and suspicions into open conflicts. Father, feeling the loss of power, became tougher. The mother became more alarming and more gloomy. Alexei and sister, despite fear, continued to support each other, finding forces in their inner struggle. Their dialogues were filled with pain, hope, and determination. Sometimes it seemed that the forces were leaving them, but they remembered what this path began for, and this gave the strength to move on. Once, during the next meeting, Alexei spoke openly, without fear and evasion. We are not enemies to each other. We are a family. But the family is not only the rules and fear. This is understanding and freedom. Coffin silence reigned in the hall. No one knew what to say. This voice, which has been suppressed for so long, sounded as a challenge, but also as a request. At that moment, Alexei saw that even the most stringent faces had moved. In their eyes, doubt flashed, the first sign of awakening. But the cult needed sacrifices, and the reckoning was not long in coming. Relatives, afraid to lose the usual world, began to close, move away. Some began to openly resist Alexei and sister, taking out pain and fear on them. It was a strength test. Alexei understood that much depends on whether they could keep faith in themselves and in those who are ready to listen and understand. The internal conflict has reached the climax. The struggle for freedom of soul turned into battle for survival, for the right to be without humiliation and fear. It was then that Alexei first realized that true power was in the ability to love without conditions and allow others to be free. Several months have passed, time filled with endless inner storms and small victories that gave hope. Alexei felt how the walls erected by the cult system of control gradually collapse, and how light began to break through in the heart of the family. But this transformation was far from easy. Each step was given by blood and tears. In their house, talk about fears, doubts, desires that were used to hide were increasingly sounding. The sister became more open, shared her anxiety, and her mother, in rare minutes of weakness, admitted that she herself was tired of living under the load of obligations and rules, not understanding how to free herself. The father seemed to be on the verge, his faith became tougher, and his voice, everything was louder. He understood, if you let go of control, the whole family will fall apart. But even he could not help but notice that love without freedom was only a shell from which it is empty and cold. Alexei felt that he was on the threshold of something great, but terrible. He understood that the struggle is not only the confrontation of the cult, but also the path to forgiveness and healing. This was something deeply human that went beyond ideologies and fear. One evening, sitting by the window, he saw the first starlight light up outside the window. He thought that even in the very dark night, there is always light, and he would lead them to freedom if they are not afraid to go towards himself. Family ties, once turned into a chain, began to become a connection, not control, but understanding. Alexei knew the path would be long and no one promised lightness. But now the real one has entered their house, living, a feeling that is not subject to cult. And at that moment, when the shadows of the past were still densely wrapped in, the hope arose that love could defeat fear and freedom. Lies. The night was quiet, but for Alexei it became a turning point. In the silence of the room, where only the weak light of the table lamp flickered, he first seriously thought, what if the family that seemed to him from the shackles was actually his only salvation? What if it is through these complex, painful, he can understand the bonds, who he really is? The memories began to roll in Wave's children's games. Laughter of sisters, mother's delicate hands, father who once told fairy tales before bedtime. All this seemed to live in a parallel reality, separated from today's cruel world, where the cult has absorbed their life. Alexei remembered how one day, being very small, he asked his mother, "Why should we be afraid of each other?" Then she answered, not looking into the eyes, "Because it is so safe." Now these words sounded like a sentence, but a new thought arose inside him. What does security mean if it is built at fear? Where is the border between care and control? And can love survive in an atmosphere of constant pressure? He could no longer remain in the role of a silent observer. He had to speak, show his fears and doubts to destroy the lie that the cult was imposed. The next day, when the whole family gathered at dinner, Alexei gathered in spirit and began, "We are all afraid to lose each other. But do we not lose ourselves when we hide behind the rules and fear? It seems to me that love should be different, free, alive." Silence filled the room. Mother lowered her eyes, father clenched his fists, and her sister looked at her brother with gratitude and fear at the same time. It was the beginning of a new conversation, painful and sincere. They did not know where this path would lead, but for the first time in a long time the family felt the breath of hope. Alexei realized the cult tried to keep them captive, playing on the most expensive family ties. But it is precisely these ties, if they are released from fear, who are able to become a power that will save them all. A few more weeks passed, filled with tense conversations, tears and quarrels. The family seemed to be awakened from a long sleep, in which everyone was afraid to even think about freedom. Alexei watched as his mother gradually let go of fear, and his father was still fighting with internal demons, trying to maintain the remnants of control. The sister became a real ally for him. Their dialogues, they were filled with sincerity and pain, but together they felt stronger. Every day he brought new tests. Cults did not leave attempts to return the family to their influence, using threats, pressure, and manipulation. Alexei knew that the path to freedom lies through the preservation of trust inside the family, through courage to tell the truth, even when it was dangerous. Once, during the next meeting, when the atmosphere was especially tense, His father suddenly interrupted the usual speeches and said, "Maybe I was too strict. Perhaps I was afraid to lose you. But now I see that we need love, not fear." These words sounded like a prophecy. Alexei felt that real healing began inside the family. But the path is still far from the end. There was a lot of strength and courage to free himself completely. In the soul of Alexei, there was a hope that once a family could become a place where it is not scary to be yourself, where cult chains will be replaced by sincerity and trust. He knew this struggle is not only for himself, but for everyone who has ever been a prisoner of fear disguised as love. And in this awareness, he found the power to go forward, despite all the obstacles. The darkening evening enveloped the house when Alex sat in his room, listening to the leaves outside the window quietly rustled. A fire flared up inside it, not the one that burns and destroys, but the one that cleans and illuminates. His thoughts circled around the family, cult, love, and betrayal. He understood. All this pain is not in vain. At that moment, his mother approached him. Her eyes were tired but soft. She sat nearby and said quietly, "Alexei, I'm afraid. I'm afraid to lose what was our support. But I'm more afraid to lose you." He took her hand and answered, "Mom, we lost not you, but fear. And this is what gives us a chance to be real." These words became the beginning of a long path to forgiveness and understanding. Family bonds, once turned into shackles, began to blossom, freeing souls and hearts. The path of Alexei was difficult, between the past and the future, between fear and hope, between despair and love. But the truth was born in this confrontation. A real family is not ideals and rules, but support, respect, and freedom to be yourself. And at the very end of this path, when the shadows of the cult could no longer dictate the conditions, Alexei realized that the most important thing is not to lose himself and those whom you love, even when it seems that everything is crumbling. A few more months have passed, the time filled with internal battles, tears, and rare moments of relief. Alexei watched his family slowly but steadily transformed. A mother, previously clinging to the rules and rituals, was now looking for new meanings in old words, trying to understand how to live without fear. The sister became more open, stopped afraid to express her feelings, and the father, albeit with difficulty, began to let go of his hard beliefs. But the cult did not give up without a fight. His dark shadows were still hanging over the house, trying to regain control through fear and manipulation. Alexei and his loved ones knew, to finally get rid of this influence, it is necessary not only to maintain internal power, but also to support each other at the most difficult moments. Once, during a quiet conversation with his sister, Alexei realized that the power of their family was in the ability to listen and understand, even when it is difficult to pronounce words. They decided to fight for freedom together, for the right to their own thoughts and feelings, for the opportunity to be themselves without looking at the cult. This path was long and winding, but each step brought them closer to the light. Alexei realized that real control is not power over others, but power over himself. And in this discovery, he found his salvation. Family ties, which were once used as shackles, became strong threads connecting hearts in understanding and love. Alexei began to notice how even the smallest details in the house begin to acquire a different meaning. The sounds of steps on the stairs no longer seemed to the harbinger of anger, and the morning light, not torture, but the promise of a new day. Each meeting, every word gained depth, filled with honesty and the desire to understand a friend. The inner world of his family was rebuilt like an old house that was about to crumble, but suddenly found a strong foundation. It was painful and scary, because at every step a cult loaned with its strict rules and prohibitions. But together, they learned to breathe freedom, allow themselves to be imperfect, make mistakes, and forgive. From time to time, Alexei caught himself thinking that for many years he lived in a cage, from whom he did not even dream of escaping. But now this cage cracked, and hope has appeared behind its bars. And once in the evening, when the whole family gathered at the table without the usual reproaches and orders, the father first said, "I am proud of you. Let our path are not over yet, but I see the light in your eyes." Tears approached Alexei's eyes. These were tears not of fear or pain, but of liberation. It was at this moment that he realized that the cult, trying to break them, on the contrary, made them stronger. Stronger in love, in honesty, in the present. The path was still far away, but now it was open. The night sank to the city, and the silence outside the window seemed special, as if nature itself lurked breath. Alexei was lying on the bed. His eyes were wide open, and thoughts did not let him go for a minute. He scrolled the events of recent months again and again as a mosaic pattern, composed of pain, fear, hope, and love. The images of childhood surfaced, warm moments with his family, when there was no gloomy cult, there was no lies that dissolved in every conversation and gaze. Then the world seemed simple, and love was natural. But now everything was different. Behind the facade of care, cruel rules were hidden, and behind smiles, fear and despair. Alexei realized that the main test is not a fight against an external enemy, but a struggle with himself, with their doubts, fears, and wounds. After all, only by overcoming this inner resistance, he can help both the family and himself. He got up, went to the window, and looked at the flickering lights of the city. Somewhere there at night, people lived who also sought freedom, from chains, from fears, from those who are trying, manage their fate. Alexei felt that not the same in this world, that his struggle is part of something more. Having picked up the old photo, the only preserved picture of the whole family without the severity of the cult, he whispered quietly, "We have not yet won, but we are on the right track. And I believe that love can do everything." Outside the window, the first trill of a bird sounded, a sign of a new dawn. The day after the day, Alexei felt more and more how the load of the past gradually subsides from his shoulders. But the struggle with the cult was not only external, it became an internal dialogue, where each question gave birth to new doubts, and each answer, hope and pain at the same time. In these thoughts, he realized that there are no easy solutions. Freedom is not a lack of fear, but the ability to live with him, not allowing him to manage. Once, returning home after a long conversation with one of the former culty participants, Alexei heard his mother speak with her sister. Their voices were low, but filled with lively anxiety and hope. "We must hold together," said the mother. "Only together we can break out of this labyrinth of lies." Alexei felt something trembling inside him. It was the beginning of a new chapter, where the family finally gained the power to be itself, despite all the fears and injuries. In the evening, when the house plunged into calm, he sat down at the table and began to write. To write about what he saw and felt, about his struggle and hope, to preserve the memory of what happened and what would happen. The path is still long, but Alexei knew that this path should go for the sake of the freedom that is born in the heart when the family ceases to be a prison and becomes home. The first rays of dawn made their way through the curtains, filling the room with warm light. Alex woke up with the feeling that something had changed, not outwardly, but inside. In recent weeks, family conversations have become not just an attempt to survive, but a real search for themselves, each other, and what it means to be a family. He went out into the living room, where his mother and sister were already gathered. Father was absent. He went to work, but their eyes we met with him less and less, as if an invisible barrier arose between them. Mother took Alexei by the hand and said, "We will no longer allow us to rule us. We will be together, no matter what." These words sounded like a mantra, permeating the entire atmosphere of the house. Alexei realized Despite all the trials, the family is alive, and they have a chance for a new life, free from lies and manipulations. He remembered how the cult once used their strongest bonds, love, trust, care, to be captured. Now the same bonds have become a support and force that helps them break out of the shackles. Tears and fears have not yet left completely, but in their hearts, for the first time in many years, a real fire was lit. A fire of hope. Alexei stood by the window, looking at the street, where passers-by were in a hurry about their business, not suspecting a small drama unfolding in this house. He felt how the severity of the past gradually retreats, giving way to something new and perfect, not always understandable, but living and present. In recent months, they experienced so much: fear, disappointment, pain of betrayal, but at the same time the power that sincere love and support of each other gave. The cult tried to break them, turn them into submissive puppets, but could not break what was deeper than fear: their desire to be free. The father, still restrained and closed, began to gradually open, realizing that power and control would never replace this connection. Mother learned to forgive herself and others. Her sister found a voice and courage to dream. Alexei understood the main thing. Real family ties are not chains, but bridges. Bridges that connect, give support, but do not require sacrifice themselves. He turned from the window, feeling his heart filled with